Vanillaware is a studio that I've casually followed over the years. I enjoyed Dragon's Crown and Odin's Sphere, and I'm tangentially aware of past works like Grim Grimoire, but I would never have called myself a hardcore Vanillaware fan. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, though, may have changed my mind. Upon seeing the initial trailer, I thought, oh, this is going to be a side-scrolling RPG of some kind, probably like Valkyrie Profile. I had no exposure to 13 Sentinels prior to this trailer, and I didn't seek out too much information afterwards. I wanted to go into the game sight unseen, and in hindsight, I'm happy I rolled the dice on 13 Sentinels, though it could have easily been a mistake had I not liked what the game actually is. But before we get into the review, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get notifications whenever I upload new videos. I also have a backlog of content that will be annotated at the end. Now let's get started. This review and the related footage is based on a physical, retail copy of the game for the PlayStation 4.
Did we do it?
First things first, what kind of game is 13 Sentinels? Well, the game's primary components are broken down into 3 parts. Remembrance, which is the story mode, Destruction, the real-time strategy combat mode, and Analysis, which compiles everything you know about the story thus far. Obviously, I won't be showing you any analysis to avoid spoilers. Each tab also has a percentage at the bottom showing how much progress you've made, which is a really nice touch. The Remembrance story mode has little tidbits of game design picked from various genres. However, in its basest form, Remembrance is a point-and-click adventure game. You discover clues and tools by investigating the area, things you discover are stored in a special inventory known as the Thought Cloud, then you use these hints and instruments to progress further into the narrative. Despite its side-scrolling gameplay and visual novel tropes, Remembrance is definitely an adventure game akin to King's Quest, albeit one that shuns the genre's more obtuse mechanics. You'll never have to combine your Thought Cloud collection into a composite item to solve a riddle, for instance. Everything exists as is to help you navigate the story and arrive at the lone conclusion. Yes, there's only one possible outcome for this story, but both the journey and the destination are quite satisfying. 13 Sentinels follows a band of gifted high schoolers throughout history as they uncover the secrets of the titular Sentinels, the invading monsters known as Deimos, and time travel. It's definitely confusing and maybe even disorienting at first, especially because the game divulges the narrative in a non-chronological order. But this non-linear storytelling is by design, presenting you with mysteries en masse at the onset, then slowly but surely allowing you to unravel them. By the end, I was absolutely in love with 13 Sentinels' story, though I do think it's aided a lot by being non-linear. If the plot was told in sequence, I think it's a lot less interesting. The enigmatic nature of the presentation is the driving force of the narrative, bolstering its strongest beats and masking its occasional missteps. And since the presentation relies on being so front-heavy, that means the story is also very slow to start. I understand firsthand feeling daunted by such a massive influx of proprietary, contextless information. But the allure of discovery drove me forward, and once I really sank my teeth into 13 Sentinels, I devoured the story with fervor. It's also not a super long game, clocking in at just about 30 hours total on average. If you don't mind a little bit of a slow push off the starting blocks, then you're in for a highly concentrated and rewarding experience. Of course, you won't just be able to straight shot right through the story mode in one go. Your progress in Remembrance is tied to your Destruction progress, the game's real-time strategy combat mode. Certain events in each mode are gated off until specific milestones are met in the opposite mode. Since it's an RTS, don't go into Destruction expecting epic cinematic Kaiju Mecha clashes, obviously. Combat is broken up into missions. You pick up to 6 of the 13 available pilots to engage enemy forces known as Deimos forces, and your goal is to protect the home base area, the Aegis terminals. There are 3 difficulty settings, but I primarily stuck with normal, which I thought was nicely balanced, if maybe even a little bit on the easy side. The easy difficulty I found to be a little too mindless, and I'm not great at RTS games anymore, so I never even touched the harder difficulty. I actually found myself comparing 13 Sentinels' default difficulty setting to that of Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings on the Nintendo DS. Both games inevitably seek to challenge the player a little bit without overstepping their respective bounds as backdrops to the greater narrative. Later battles do amp up the challenge a bit, but it's never overwhelming, and if you ever find yourself either too flustered by the challenge or too bored by the simplicity, you can always change the difficulty settings between missions. Destruction also has some basic RPG elements as well. You earn points known as meta chips for completing both destruction missions and remembrance missions, and you use meta chips to improve your Sentinels. Each Sentinel has a number of potential maneuvers to be unlocked and upgraded, and you can also put meta chips directly towards boosting a Sentinel's stats. The Aegis terminal can also be upgraded, and it has its own skill tree as well. In the end though, destruction is mostly there out of necessity. It sticks around just long enough to keep everything tied together, then steps back to allow remembrance to take the spotlight. If I had to estimate, I'd say 13 Sentinels is about 70% remembrance, 30% destruction. The combat is decent, maybe even good, but it's definitely not the mode that will stick in my memory long after this review is done. Everything else about 13 Sentinels is academic. The art style is fabulous, as is tradition for Vanillaware. Remembrance features Vanillaware's signature art design that we've come to know and love over the years, though it is admittedly toned down a lot on the fan service compared to previous titles. On the other hand, Destruction features simpler, retro-modern 3D graphics unlike Vanillaware's traditional body of work. Attack animations are basic, but combat uses particle effects to enhance both the visuals and the impact of offense. Frankly, I like the visuals in both modes, though I wouldn't begrudge any opinions to the contrary regarding Destruction mode. Remembrance's graphics specifically are what caught my eye when I initially learned about 13 Sentinels. It just looks so great. Destruction's graphics are good too, though I do wish Destruction did more to emphasize the scale of combat from an individual's perspective. The voice acting, I think, deserves particular praise. I played maybe the first third of the game in English, and I really like the English dub. I think the added efforts that the localization team put into making sure the English recordings were properly equalized also deserves a lot more love and appreciation. I mean, just consider for a second what a thankless job that is. If the localization team excels at its work, most players won't even notice anything. And the end result is pretty much seamless, which is impressive considering it was the first time the studio had to deal with a cast working entirely remote and/or from home. I hope their efforts are met with proper kudos. I also really like the Japanese VO, which comprised the majority of my playthrough. I think there are certain personality traits that shine a lot brighter or are more obvious in Japanese than in English, though you won't notice this at all if you don't speak at least some Japanese. Plus, considering the setting and characters, I found Japanese to be more apropos in general. Still, just take a listen and decide for yourself. I don't think you can go wrong with either language option.
Class is already over.
Kurabe-kun? Thanks.
You were out cold, huh?
Just now, I had another weird dream. And you were there.
Huh? Me?
もう授業終わったよ。
黒部君。ありがとう。
よく寝てたね。
私、今、またおかしな夢見てた。君がいる夢。
僕
And the music is great too. The score hops so effortlessly between an upbeat slice-of-life anime to dramatic kaiju disaster flick to a cyberpunk electronica without any hesitation, and it's awesome. Here are some of the early game tracks to demonstrate, which I've chosen to keep this video as spoiler-free as possible. Despite not knowing anything about the game beforehand, and then being thrown several consecutive curveballs once I actually dove into the game head first, 13 Sentinels really impressed me. It's incredibly story heavy, and the combat is more filler than substance. But the RTS mode still more than manages to carry its weight, and more importantly, never overstays its welcome. And the story is so smartly written and presented to keep and develop the intrigue as you make progress. Plus, for film enthusiasts like myself, 13 Sentinels is full of references to monster movies, mecha media, kaiju flicks, and more. From top to bottom, you can tell this game was a passion project straight from the heart. It's a slow starter, no doubt, but if you stick with it, you may find something special. 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim, earns an 8.5 out of 10. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notified whenever I post new content. If you like films, check out my Ghost of Tsushima video annotated on screen. It's a very personal video that I'm very proud of. Or check out one of those video playlists. Thanks.